He was 8 years old when he promised he'd come back for her. 18 years later, he's the Alpha King summoning every eligible female in the kingdom to choose a queen, and he looks through her like a stranger. But deep in the palace shadows, a man smiles. The last loose thread is about to be cut. In the rain-soaked dark, Delia clutched her stolen loaf of bread like a lifeline. At 14, she was already marked as the pack's lowest Omega, scrawny, overlooked, surviving on scraps from the Alpha's table. But when she heard the faint whimper from the abandoned mill, her heart seized. There, huddled in the straw, was a boy no older than 8, his ribs sharp beneath his torn shirt, eyes hollow with a hunger that mirrored her own ache. The cry came again, a soft, ragged thing that tugged at the Omega instinct buried deep in her bones, the urge to mend, to nurture. She shouldn't be here. The pack enforcers prowled these outskirts, their noses keen for thieves or intruders. But the sound pulled her forward, past the creaking doorframe, into the dim cavern. The boy was curled in a nest of damp straw, his knees drawn to his chest. His dark hair was matted with mud, his skin pale as birch bark. When lightning flashed, illuminating his face, she saw forest green eyes flecked with amber, wide and watchful. "I'm not a thief," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper over the roar outside. "I just needed shelter." Delia knelt slowly, the loaf still warm in her hands. A stolen luxury from the communal ovens where she'd swiped it during the evening rush. She tore off a chunk, the steam rising like a peace offering. "Here," she said, holding it out. "Eat slow, or it'll come back up." He eyed her for a long moment, then took it with trembling fingers. As he bit in, crumbs scattering, a small sigh escaped him. She settled against the wall, watching him as rain drummed on the roof. Who was he? Strays wandered into Whisperfen Vale sometimes, displaced by the border skirmishes, to the north, but this boy carried no pack scent, just the wild tang of river mud and distant pines. "What's your name?" she asked, keeping her voice soft, like the lullabies her mother had sung before the illness stole her away. "Lachlan." He swallowed, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Yours?" "Delia." He nodded, finishing the bread. Then, unexpectedly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, whittled stick, shaped roughly like a wolf's head, its edges smoothed by tiny fingers. "Trade," he said, holding it out. "For the bread. I know it's not much, but it's all I have." She took it, the wood warm from his palm, the crude carving oddly endearing. A laugh bubbled up in her. "Fair trade, though I think I got the better end." His lips twitched in a shy smile, the first crack in his guarded facade, and in that moment, he looked less like a feral stray and more like a pup testing the world. The next day, Delia told herself it had to be a one-time mercy, but when twilight fell, her feet carried her back to the mill. Every step felt like a countdown. If anyone smelled the theft on her, she'd face the lash, or worse, exile from the only pack she'd ever known. Omegas didn't get second chances. Yet the thought of him alone in that damp ruin pulled harder than fear. She slipped inside. Lachlan was waiting, perched on a fallen beam, his posture straighter than before. When she entered, his eyes lit up, amber flecks catching the fading light. "You came back," he said, surprise softening his tone. "Of course." She handed over the food. "Can't let a fair trader go hungry." He bit into the apple, juice dribbling down his chin, and made a soft hum of approval. "This is good. Really good. Sweeter than the ones I found up north." His compliment was simple, but it warmed her more than any fire. No one in the pack ever noticed her efforts. The betas wolfed down meals without a glance. The alphas demanded more without thanks. But Lachlan savored every bite. It turned into a secret ritual. She'd rise before dawn to haul water, endure jabs about her useless Omega scent, scrub pots until her hands cracked. But evenings brought escape. She'd steal what she could, a heel of bread one night, wild berries the next, even a strip of salted fish, and hurry to the mill, her heart quickening at the sight of him waiting. Lachlan grew brighter with each visit, his cheeks filling out, his movements less tentative. He shared stories in fragments, running through pine-thick forests, dodging shadows he called hunters, sleeping under the stars. But there were gaps in his tales, moments where his eyes darted away, as if guarding deeper secrets. One crisp evening near the end of the second week, Delia arrived at the mill with a small triumph tucked in her apron, a thick slice of rye bread, its crust dusted with caraway seeds. She'd even scavenged a handful of blackberries from the patch behind the smokehouse. Nothing fancy, but to her it felt like a feast. Lachlan was already on the low beam, eyes fixed on the door. The second she stepped inside, his whole body jerked upright. Relief flooded his small face, breath whooshing out like he'd been holding it for hours. He hopped down too quickly, stumbling a step, then caught himself and hurried over. I was watching the path. Thought maybe the enforcers finally caught you. Not today. She smiled, kneeling to unpack her offerings. Look what I brought. Smell it. He leaned in close, nose almost touching the crust, inhaling deeply. Delia, this smells like home. Did you make this? She laughed quietly. No, I just borrowed it from the ovens, but I picked the berries myself, crushed a couple to make sure they were sweet. As he popped a piece of the bread into his mouth, his small shoulders relaxed, and he let out a happy sigh. It's perfect, he declared. Soft inside, crunchy outside, and those little seeds, they pop like tiny surprises. You must have known I like things with surprises, he grinned, crumbs clinging to the corner of his mouth. You're magic with food, Delia. He said it with such sincerity it made her blush, a warmth spreading through her that she hadn't felt since her mother's arms. She handed him a few berries next. He took them one by one, rolling each between his fingers. Juice stained his lips dark, and he licked it away, then looked up at her with that mischievous tilt to his head. You should taste one too, he said. I already had some on the way here, she lied. Not with me. He plucked the ripest berry from his palm and held it out like an offering. Open. Delia hesitated, then parted her lips. He placed the berry gently on her tongue. The fruit burst sweet tart against her teeth, and for a heartbeat she forgot the cold mill, the risk, the pack rules. See? He said softly, watching her face with intense focus. Better when we share. You're getting bold, she teased. Feeding me now? He ducked his head, cheeks pink, but didn't back down. If I was bigger, I'd bring you whole baskets, blackberries, honey, bread. I'd make sure you never had to borrow anything again. He looked up through his lashes, voice dropping to a whisper. I'd even steal the moon for you if you wanted it, though I think you'd look pretty with starlight instead. Delia laughed, the sound bright in the dim mill. Moon thief and star charmer. Your trouble, Lachlan. Too young to be charming girls like me. I'm not charming, he protested, but grinned, scooting closer until their arms brushed. Just saying what's true. She let him stay close, telling herself it was harmless. One night, under a sliver moon, he spoke of shadows that chase, his voice hitching, eyes flicking to the door. Delia didn't press. Instead, she noticed the scar on his wrist, pink and fresh. It tugged at her, a mark of his hidden pains. Wait here, she said, slipping out into the gathering dusk. She foraged quickly. Vines from the riverbank, her polished river stone, and a feather from a rare storm bird. Back in the mill, she wove them into a bracelet, her fingers deft from years of mending. For you, she said, tying it around his scarred wrist. A lucky charm. Vines to hold you strong, stone to keep you steady, feather to set you free when you need it. Lachlan's eyes went huge. He traced the weave with one careful finger, then looked up at her with such open wonder it stole her breath. Delia, when I'm grown, really grown, I'll come back. I'll protect you, like this protects me. His voice dropped, suddenly shy but determined. And maybe we could hold hands, like in the stories where the brave wolf finds his favorite person. Fondness bloomed in her chest, warm and unexpected. He was a spark of connection in her lonely world, but the years between them felt like a chasm, her 14 heavy with burdens, his 8 still full of dreams. Lachlan, you're too young for such promises, she whispered, cupping his cheek. He leaned into her palm, undeterred. Not forever. I'll grow up fast. You'll see. On what would have been their 29th night, Delia hurried to the mill with a pocket full of dried herbs and a fresh roll, her steps light with anticipation. But the door creaked open to emptiness. No small figure waiting, no shy smile. His scent, pine and earth, faded into the river's mist, as if he'd dissolved like a dream. Lachlan? Her voice echoed, panic rising. She searched the straw, the beams, even waded the shallows calling his name. Nothing. Days blurred into frantic hunts. Her worry twisted into grief. Had the shadows caught him? Was he safe? Delia threw herself into the kitchens, inspired by his compliments, the way he'd savored her scraps, calling them magic. She apprenticed under the cook, learning to coax flavor from nothing, turning meager ingredients into sustenance that warmed bodies and souls. But nights brought dreams. His green eyes, his earnest vows, the gaps in his tales, hinting at deeper perils. Whisperfen Vale moved on, but Delia carried the scar, a quiet wound for the boy who'd traded pieces of his heart, only to vanish into the mist. In the shadowed throne room of Stormvale Citadel, Alpha King Lachlan sat alone on the dais. The crown rested heavy on his brow, a circlet of twisted gold that matched the scars etched across his arms. At 26, he ruled a fractured kingdom with an iron will and a colder heart. Yet tonight, as he always did when the court slept, he turned his left wrist to the pale light. A worn bracelet, vines frayed to threads, the polished stone dulled by time. He traced the weave with a calloused thumb, the motion habitual. He had sacrificed everything to claim this throne. In the heart of the Forbidden Wilds, the Mist Spirit had demanded payment. Lachlan had knelt in the choking pines, 8 years old, already bleeding from the chase, and begged for one exception. Not the bracelet, he whispered, small fingers curled protectively around the woven vines. It's mine. The only thing that's mine. Please. The spirit had laughed, a sound like wind through broken glass, and taken everything else. In exchange, it granted him what he'd needed to survive, the raw power to shift into a wolf larger than any in the realm, claws that could tear stone, a roar that shattered enemy lines, strength enough to turn a hunted boy into an unstoppable king. But now, sitting on the dais, 18 years later, Lachlan no longer remembered why it mattered. The ritual had left only echoes, phantom warmth, a hollow ache when he touched the stone. He traced the worn threads anyway, thumb circling in an absent rhythm. The motion hurt like pressing on a bruise he couldn't see. Why had he begged so hard for this one small thing? A knock echoed. His beta, Brendan, entered with a sealed parchment. Summons from the border packs, my king. The mating ceremony approaches. They send their eligible nobles, mostly. Lachlan's lip curled. The ceremony was politics, a public display to bind fractured alliances through a chosen queen. He had rejected every candidate for 3 cycles, and he had no plans to change that. Send word we'll receive them. All of them. Brendan hesitated. Even the Omegas? especially the Omegas. Lachlan's gaze returned to the bracelet. Bring them all. Delia had grown into a woman the pack could no longer ignore. At 32, she stood in the Whisper Fen Vale kitchens before dawn, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hands buried in dough that would become the day's bread. She had become the pack's heart in quiet ways, feeding the young, the sick, the overlooked. Her meals nourished more than bodies. They reminded wolves what home tasted like. But the summons arrived like a thunderclap. The beta delivered it himself, parchment sealed with the Stormvale crest. Every eligible female of the pack was called to the capital for Alpha King Lachlan's mating ceremony. No exceptions. The kitchen erupted in murmurs. Delia kept kneading, knuckles white against the flour. She had no illusions. Omegas like her didn't get chosen for thrones. She'd long accepted her place, useful, unseen, unclaimed. Yet the name, Lachlan, pricked at old wounds. She pushed it down, focused on the bread rising under her palms. The world was full of Lachlans. Still, when the caravan left 3 days later, Delia rode among the servants, apron traded for a simple gray cloak. She reminded herself that kings chose youth, beauty, power, not a cook with calluses on her palms. The capital rose against jagged mountains, towers of black stone veined with silver. Banners snapped in the wind as the delegation entered the grand hall. Delia stayed at the back, head lowered, heart hammering. Nobles in silks presented themselves first, daughters of alphas, scented with rose and ambition. Lachlan sat on the dais, crown glinting, expression unreadable. He listened, nodded, dismissed each, with polite finality. Then his gaze swept the room and caught on her. Something in the set of his shoulders shifted. His fingers, long, scarred, brushed the cuff of his sleeve, lingering where the bracelet hid. Delia's breath snagged. His forest green eyes locked on hers, older, harder, shadowed by a king's weight, but the exact same gaze that had once lit up at stolen bread. Then his thumb traced the frayed vines around his wrist, the same absent caress she'd watched a boy give her fresh woven charm. Her knees weakened. Was this her Lachlan? He rose slowly, descent measured. The hall hushed. He approached the servants' line, gaze fixed on her like a wolf sighting prey. Up close, he was devastating. Tall, broad-shouldered, power radiating in waves that made her Omega instincts flare. But the boy was gone. The vulnerability, the shy grin, the earnest vows, all buried under regal steel. You, he said, voice low enough for only her. Step forward. Delia obeyed, chin high, despite the tremor in her limbs. She met his eyes. Your Majesty. His brow furrowed, confusion warring with something deeper. Pull, curiosity, an ache he couldn't name. Your name? Delia of Whisper Fen Vale. His fingers twitched at his side, brushing the hidden bracelet again. A flash crossed his face, then shuddered. You will attend the private audience tomorrow. Alone. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Delia felt heat rise in her cheeks. As you wish. He lingered a heartbeat longer, gaze tracing her face as if searching for something lost. Then he turned away, but not before she saw his hand clench, knuckles white. That night, in the cramped guest quarters for servants, Delia sat rigid on the narrow cot, knees drawn tight to her chest. Her fingers, trembling now, slipped into the hidden pocket of her cloak and closed around the small, whittled stick she hadn't touched in years. The wolf's head carving was still there, edges worn smooth by time and her own absent thumb strokes. She hadn't looked at it since the first winter after he vanished. It had hurt too much. Now she held it up in the thin moonlight slanting through the high window, turning it slowly. The same crude lines, the same boyish care. He was alive. Lachlan, her Lachlan, was the Alpha King. But why did his gaze slide past her like she was a stranger? The only answer that fit made her stomach turn. He remembered. He remembered the mill, the bread, the promises. And he was ashamed. Ashamed that the king he'd become had once clung to an Omega's kindness like it was the only light in the dark. He'd looked at her tonight and chosen to bury it, to keep the throne clean of that old weakness. Delia pressed the carved wolf to her lips, wood cool against skin that suddenly felt too hot. Tears burned tracks down her cheeks before she could stop them. He was alive. He was king. And he had decided the boy who'd once sworn to steal the moon for her no longer existed. The next evening, guards escorted her to a private garden behind the citadel. Moonlight silvered the paths. Night-blooming jasmine scented the air. Lachlan waited on a stone bench, cloak discarded, sleeves rolled to reveal the bracelet, worn, faded, but unmistakable. He rose when she approached. No crown now, just a man in dark leathers, hair tousled by wind. "Sit," he said. Delia perched on the bench's edge, hands clasped to hide their shake. "You summoned me, Your Majesty." "Lachlan," he corrected quietly. "Here, just Lachlan." She swallowed. "Why am I here?" He studied her, green amber eyes searching. "I don't know. When I saw you in the hall, something pulled, like a thread I thought was severed." His fingers brushed the bracelet. It's been with me since I was a boy. I don't remember who gave it to me, only that it mattered." Delia's vision blurred. She looked away, toward the shadowed pines beyond the garden wall. "Some things are better left forgotten." He leaned closer, voice rough. "Tell me why you look at me like you've lost something." She met his gaze then, heartache raw. "Because I have. And the boy I lost. He wouldn't recognize the king in front of me." Confusion flickered, then a spark, something fighting to surface. "Tell me about him." Delia hesitated. Their age gap stretched between them, her 32 years of quiet survival, his 26 of conquest and sacrifice. She felt too old, too worn, too ordinary for this man who commanded kingdoms. "He was 8, she said softly, "starving alone in a mill. I fed him scraps for a month. He traded me trinkets. He promised to come back when he was grown, to protect me. Then he vanished. I thought he died." Lachlan went still. His hand closed over the bracelet, knuckles white. "And if he wasn't? If he came back? Changed? Then I'd wonder what price he paid," she whispered, "and whether the boy I knew survived it." Silence stretched, thick with unspoken grief. Lachlan's gaze dropped to her hands. "Stay," he said suddenly. "Help me remember." Delia stood, heart fracturing. "You don't remember because you chose not to, and I won't beg a king to see the Omega he left behind." She walked away, steps measured, tears silent. Behind her, Lachlan remained seated, fingers tracing vines that once held a promise. The pull in his chest sharpened to pain, familiar, aching, impossible. Delia kept walking, picking up her pace. The garden path gave way to the wider stone corridor of the citadel's outer wing, then to the torchlit archway leading toward the servants' gate. She moved with deliberate calm, chin high, refusing to let the guards see her wipe the tears from her cheeks. The night air turned colder as she passed through the arched exit. Moonlight silvered the gravel path that led to the outer wall, and freedom. She told herself she was done hoping, done hurting. If Lachlan wanted to pretend the mill never happened, she would make it easy for him. She would slip away before dawn, back to Whisperfen Vale, back to her kitchens and her quiet life. The carved wolf stick burned against her palm where she clutched it inside her cloak. She would not look back. But footsteps, sharp, urgent, cracked the silence behind her. "Delia!" His voice, low and rough, carried across the gravel like a command. She froze, shoulders rigid. The footsteps closed the distance. Lachlan appeared at her side, breathing hard, cloak thrown hastily over his shoulders, no guards in sight. He had actually run, after her through the palace grounds, the Alpha King, who never chased anyone. "Stop, please." She finally turned to look at him. Moonlight carved shadows across his face, showing the new scars on his jaw, fresh, jagged lines he never had as a boy. His green-amber eyes were wild, unguarded for the first time tonight. Delia searched those eyes for the lie she'd convinced herself must be there. But there was none, only raw confusion, a flicker of fear he couldn't quite hide, and something deeper, something that looked a lot like the boy who once pressed a berry to her lips and whispered he'd steal the moon. He hadn't lied. He truly didn't remember. All the anger she'd built, every bitter thought that he'd chosen to bury her, to pretend she was nothing, crumbled into dust. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't hiding. He was simply empty. The memories she'd carried like open wounds for 18 years had been torn from him, leaving only this scarred stranger wearing her bracelet. Her throat closed. Tears she'd fought so hard to contain spilled over anyway. "You really don't remember," she whispered, the words tasting like grief. Lachlan shook his head slowly. "Nothing before the wilds, just echoes. Pain when I look at you, like I'm supposed to know you." She looked down at the gravel between them. "I thought you were pretending, that you saw me and you were ashamed of the boy who needed an Omega's scraps." His face twisted. "If I'd remembered, I would never—" He stopped himself, jaw tight. "I don't know what I would have done, but I know I wouldn't have let you walk away tonight." Delia exhaled, shaky. She thought of the carved wolf stick in her pocket, thought of the shadows he'd once spoken of in frightened whispers. "I believe you," she said quietly. "About the memories." He took one careful step closer. "Then stay. Help me remember what I lost. Help me find out who took it." His voice dropped, urgent. "Because something's wrong here. In the palace. Someone's been watching me. I can feel it like a blade at my back, but I can't see the hand holding it. And the only time the feeling eases is when I'm near you." Delia's pulse quickened. She remembered his childhood stories, the gaps, the darting eyes, the fear of being chased. Whatever hunted him then hadn't stopped. "If I'm right," he continued, "if the danger is as close as it feels, then neither of us is safe. Not alone." She met his gaze. No kingly mask, just a man, scarred, exhausted, afraid in a way kings weren't supposed to be. "I'll stay," she said finally, "until we know what's hunting us." Relief broke across his face. For a heartbeat, he looked exactly like the child who'd once grinned through berry-stained lips. "Thank you," he said, softer this time. She managed a faint, tired smile. "Don't thank me yet. We haven't survived the night." They turned back toward the palace together, footsteps quiet on the gravel, and somewhere in the palace depths, a lord smiled into the darkness of his private chambers. The pieces were falling into place. Delia was given rooms in the citadel's eastern wing, a small bedchamber with a hearth, a window overlooking the pine-shadowed mountains, a writing desk she never used. Guards were posted outside her door as silent protection. Lachlan's orders. No one questioned them. He came to her every evening after the council dispersed, always alone, always without fanfare. No crown, no royal leathers, just a man in dark linen, sleeves rolled to reveal the bracelet, hair still wine-tousled from riding the outer patrols. He never announced himself. He simply knocked once, soft, almost hesitant, then stepped inside when she opened the door. At first, the conversations were careful, fragile. He asked about the mill, about the bread, about the bracelet. She answered honestly but sparingly, watching his face for any flicker of recognition. There was none, only that same haunted pull in his eyes, the way his thumb would circle the stone whenever she spoke of the boy who'd once traded her a wolf head stick. But the air between them thickened with every meeting. It started small, a brush of fingers when he passed her a cup of tea, the way his gaze lingered on her mouth when she spoke, the low timbre of his voice when he said her name, Delia, like he was tasting it for the first time. She felt it in her bones, the slow, inevitable pull of two people who had once been everything to each other. One night, after a long silence, he asked, "Did I ever touch you? Before?" She froze, teacup halfway to her lips. "No, Lachlan. You were 8. You held my hand once. That was all." His jaw tightened. "I wish I remembered it. Every time I'm near you, I feel like I'm supposed to." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on hers. "Like my body knows something my mind doesn't. Like I've done this before. Sat across from you in firelight, watched the way the light catches in your hair, wanted to reach out, and..." He stopped, breath uneven. "I don't know what comes after, but I want to." Delia's pulse roared in her ears. She should have looked away, should have reminded him of the years between them, the crown on his brow, the gulf that power and pain had carved. Instead, she whispered, "Then remember, they didn't touch that night." But the space between them shrank to nothing. She could feel the heat of him across the small table, could smell the pine and leather on his skin, could hear the quick rhythm of his breathing. When he finally stood to leave, he paused at the door, hand on the frame. He looked back over his shoulder, and a slow smile curved his mouth, the same mischievous tilt she remembered from a boy with big promises. "Tomorrow, I'll come earlier." His eyes held hers a beat longer than necessary before he slipped out into the hall. Delia let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding, cheeks warm, heart racing like she was 14 again. The warmth lingered on her skin long after the door closed. But by morning, it had begun to feel fragile. The danger grew in quiet, creeping ways, whispers in the corridors that hushed when she passed, a servant who flinched when Lachlan's name was spoken. Lachlan's beta, Brendan, doubled the guards around her, wing without explanation. When she asked why, he only said, "His Majesty's orders. There are currents in the court. Better safe than sorry." But the currents had teeth, and they were already closing in. One morning, a maid brought Delia's breakfast tray and lingered too long, eyes darting to the window. When Delia turned to look, the maid slipped out. Minutes later, a folded note slid under the door. "He doesn't belong to you. Leave before the throne claims what's left of him." Delia burned the note in the hearth. Her hands shook. That evening, Lachlan arrived earlier than usual. He looked drawn, shadows under his eyes. Without preamble, he said, "Someone tried to poison my wine at the midday council." Delia's stomach dropped. "Who?" "I don't know. The cupbearer was new. He vanished before I could question him." Lachlan rubbed a hand over his face. "It wasn't enough to kill, just enough to weaken, to make me look unsteady, vulnerable." She crossed, to him, instinct overriding caution. "You think it's connected to me?" "I think so." His gaze locked on hers. "The attack started the day after I singled you out in the hall. Someone doesn't want me remembering. Someone wants me isolated, and they're getting bolder." Delia reached out, fingers brushing his sleeve, right over the bracelet. He stilled, breath catching. "Then we find them," she said. "Together." He covered her hand with his. The contact burned, warm, steady, electric. For a moment neither moved, palms pressed, pulses sinking through thin fabric. Then she pulled back, slowly, reluctantly. "Or I could leave. Tonight." before whoever this is decides I'm the easiest way to hurt you. Lachlan's jaw tightened. No. She searched his face. Lachlan, you're not running. Not from this. Not from me. He stepped closer, close enough she could feel the heat rolling off him. If they want me isolated, they can try. But they don't get to take you away again. Not while I'm breathing. She swallowed. You don't even remember. I remember enough to know I'd rather face every blade in this palace than watch you walk out that door. She nodded once, throat tight. Then teach me how to fight, she said, so I'm not the weakness they're counting on. He exhaled, a small, fierce smile flickering. Dawn, hidden courtyard, where's something you can move in? Dawn came cold and gray. The courtyard was tucked behind the eastern wing, ringed by high stone walls draped in ivy, invisible from most windows. Lachlan waited there in plain dark leathers, sleeves rolled to the elbows, bracelet glinting on his wrist. He didn't speak at first, just watched her cross the gravel, eyes tracing the way her simple tunic clung to her shoulders and skimmed the curve of her waist, lingering on the braid she'd twisted to keep hair from her face, then drifting lower to follow the line of her legs as she moved. When she reached him, his eyes lifted to hers, the corner of his mouth twitching in that small smile that said he knew exactly what he'd just done and wasn't sorry. They started slow, basic stances, how to shift weight, how to read an opponent's shoulders before they moved. He was patient, precise, hands gentle when he adjusted her form, but every correction brought him closer than necessary. Fingers on her elbow to turn her hips, palms sliding low on her back to steady her balance, lingering there a second too long. Breath warm against her ear as he murmured, "Keep your guard up. Like this." Voice dropping so low it vibrated through her. Each time he stepped back, the cold rushed in, leaving her aching for the heat of him. By the third morning, the lessons got sharper. He showed her how to break a wrist hold. She practiced on him, careful, controlled, until he reversed it in one fluid motion, spinning her until her back hit the stone wall. His forearm braced, above her head, body caging hers, thigh pressed between hers for balance. They froze. His breath fanned her cheek, pine, steel, rain, and something darker, hungrier. His pulse thundered against her collarbone, fast, unsteady, matching the frantic beat of hers. "You're faster than you look," he murmured. "You're holding back," she said, chin tilted, eyes locked on his. His gaze dropped to her mouth. "If I didn't, I wouldn't stop." The air between them crackled, thick with everything they weren't saying. She could feel every inch where they touched, his chest rising and falling against hers, the heat of his forearm inches from her temple, the faint tremor in his frame that said he was fighting himself. She tilted her chin higher. "Then don't stop." For one heartbeat, the world narrowed to the heat of his body, the thunder of his pulse against her skin. His head dipped, slow, deliberate, until his lips hovered a breath from hers. Close enough his eyes, fluttered half shut, dark with want. Then footsteps, sharp, hurried, cracked across the gravel beyond the ivy-covered wall. Lachlan went rigid, his head snapped up, eyes blazing amber, wolf rising fast behind them. He didn't release her, but his body shifted, protective, shielding. Arms still braced above her head as he listened. A guard's voice carried through the ivy, low and urgent. "Your Majesty, the council's been summoned early. Lord Demies insists it's urgent. Something about a threat from the northern border." Lachlan's jaw clenched so hard a muscle ticked. He looked down at her, eyes still dark with hunger, but now edged with frustration and something fiercer. Fear. He exhaled harshly through his nose. "Later," he rasped. "We finish this later." His hands slid down the wall, fingertips brushing her cheek in one last ghost of a touch before he turned toward the sound. Delia stayed pressed to the stone, breathing hard. The waiting was torture, but the danger was closer now. Later that day, as she passed a council chamber, Lord Demise stepped into the corridor, silver-haired, soft-spoken, always at Lachlan's right hand during meetings. He smiled politely at her. "Lady Delia, you've become quite indispensable to His Majesty. One wonders what secrets you hold that the rest of us do not." His gaze flicked to her throat, then away. The smile lingered. Delia inclined her head, pulse jumping. "Only recipes, my lord." His laugh was quiet. "Of course." He moved on, but the chills stayed, and the attacks only escalated. A crossbow bolt whistled past Lachlan's head during a hunt. A stair railing gave way beneath Delia's foot. Only her quick grip on the banister saved her from a broken neck. A fire started in the eastern wing at midnight. Guards found oil-soaked rags and a discarded servant's cloak. No one claimed responsibility. No one was caught. Lachlan grew more protective. He insisted Delia move to chambers closer, to his own. He walked her there himself each night, hand hovering at the small of her back. He began leaving small gifts outside her door, a sprig of wildflowers, a perfect blackberry, a heel of fresh bread wrapped in linen. No note, no explanation, just the silent message. "I remember how you fed me. Let me feed you now." The heat between them became unbearable. One night, after a particularly brutal council session, he came to her rooms unannounced. Rain lashed the windows. He was soaked, hair dripping, eyes stormy. "They're closing ranks. Demis is pushing for a quick alliance marriage to a Northern Alpha's daughter. He says it will stabilize the throne. He says I'm distracted." The last word came out bitter. Delia rose from her chair slowly, her hands clenched at her sides. "You are," she said quietly. Then she looked up at him, eyes bright with something sharp and fragile. "Will you do it? Marry her to keep the peace?" Lachlan's jaw worked. "Of course not. Delia, you might have to. You're king. The throne comes first. That's what they'll say. That's what Demis is counting on." He reached for her then, hands framing her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones like she might break. "The throne can burn for all I care. I can't stop thinking about you. Every time I close my eyes, I see you in firelight. I hear your laugh. I feel your hand on my cheek telling me I'm too young. And I want—" He broke off, breathing hard, forehead dropping to rest against hers. "I want to remember what comes after that. I want it to be you. Only you." She closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "Then fight for it," she whispered. "I am." He brushed a damp strand of hair from her face. "But someone wants me to forget. Someone wants me weak. And they're willing to kill to keep it that way." She caught his wrist, right over the bracelet. "Then we make them show themselves." "You're not afraid?" "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But I've already lost you once. I won't do it again." Something in his expression cracked. He leaned in closer. "I don't know what I did to deserve you twice," he whispered, "but I'm not letting you go this time." They stood like that for a long moment, breathing each other's air, hearts hammering in the quiet. Then he pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Tonight, I want you to see something. The real me. The wolf. I need you to see him before anything else happens." Delia's pulse skipped. "Lachlan, I've seen wolves before. Not like this." A small, nervous smile tugged at his mouth. "I'm bigger now. A lot bigger. And I don't want you to be afraid of me." She reached up, brushed her thumb along his jaw. "I could never be afraid of you." His eyes darkened, something fierce and tender flashing through them. "Then come with me." He led her through the shadowed corridors to the hidden courtyard behind the eastern wing. The moon rode high, clouds scudding fast across its face. Lachlan stopped in the center of the gravel, turned to face her. "Stay there, and don't run." She smiled despite the sudden tightness in her chest. "I'm not running." He exhaled once, shaky, then closed his eyes. The shift came fast and beautiful. Fur rippled over skin like liquid moonlight, bones reshaped with a low, rolling crack. In seconds, the man was gone, replaced by a wolf so massive he dwarfed the stone benches around him. Silver-black coat gleaming under the moon, shoulders broader than a warhorse, amber eyes glowing like banked coals. He was enormous, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, larger than legend said was possible. Claws like obsidian knives, a presence that filled the courtyard, made the air feel heavier. Delia's breath caught. Lachlan's wolf lowered his head slowly, ears flicking back, tail sweeping once in a hesitant arc. He took one careful step, toward her, then another, until he was close enough she could feel the radiant heat rolling off him. He stopped, watching her with those burning eyes, waiting. She stepped forward without hesitation. He made a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the gravel. She reached out, fingers sinking into the thick fur at his ruff. Warm. So warm. She pressed her palm flat against his chest, felt the steady thunder of his heart beneath muscle and bone. "You're beautiful," she whispered. The wolf made a soft, almost wounded sound. He dipped his massive head until his muzzle brushed her shoulder, gentle, careful, like he was afraid of hurting her. She buried both hands in his fur, pressed her cheek to the side of his neck. "You're not a monster. You're mine." He shuddered under her touch. Then slowly he shifted back, fur receding, bones reshaping, until the man knelt before her again, breathing hard, skin gleaming with sweat and moonlight. He looked up at her, eyes still, glowing faintly amber, vulnerable in a way that made her chest ache. "You didn't run. I told you I wouldn't." He rose slowly, towering over her again, but this time there was no distance left. He cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones, gaze dropping to her mouth. "I've waited 18 years for this, even if I didn't know it." Then he kissed her. The first press of his lips was soft, like he was afraid she might vanish. But when she sighed against him, hands against his chest, something snapped. The kiss turned desperate, hungry. His mouth moved over hers with bruising need, tongue sweeping in to taste her, claiming every breath she gave him. She arched into him, fingers tangling in his damp hair, pulling him closer. His hands slid down her back, palms splaying wide, pressing her flush against the hard heat of his body. She felt every inch of him, broad chest, taut abs, the unmistakable press of his arousal against her belly. He groaned, low in his throat, the sound vibrating into her mouth. One hand slid up to cradle the back of her head, tilting her so he could deepen the kiss, devouring her like a man starved. She met him stroke for stroke, teeth grazing his lower lip, nails scraping lightly down his back. He shuddered, hips rocking once against hers in helpless reflex. When they finally broke apart, his breathing was ragged, eyes closed like he was fighting for control. "I still don't remember everything, but gods, I feel it. I feel you." She smiled through swollen lips, tears slipping free. "That's enough for now." He laughed and kissed her again, softer this time, lingering, like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth. When he pulled back, he pressed his lips to her temple, her cheek, the corner of her eye. "I promise I'll keep you safe, no matter what comes, no matter who tries to take this from us." She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him close. "Then keep me close," she murmured, "and don't let go." The rain began to fall in earnest, soft at first, then harder, washing over them both. But neither moved. They stood there in the downpour, wrapped in each other, hearts pounding in time, while the storm raged around them and the palace slept. For the first time in 18 years, they were exactly where they belonged. The next morning, a body was found in the lower dungeons, a young servant who had served Lachlan's wine the day of the poisoning attempt. His throat was cut. In his hand, a small carved wolf stick, eerily similar to the one Delia carried. The note pinned to his chest read, "She dies next." Lachlan found Delia in the kitchens, where she'd gone to think. He burst through the door, face white. "We need to leave. Now." She stared at him. "What happened?" He showed her the stick. Her blood ran cold. "That looks like the one you gave me," she whispered. Lachlan's hand closed around hers. "Someone knows. Someone knows what we were, and they're using it to hurt us." Delia looked up at him, eyes blazing. "Then we end this." They didn't wait for dawn. Brendan met them in the corridor outside the lower dungeons, face grim. The servant was new, hired 3 weeks ago. No pack ties, but he was seen talking to one person more than once. Lachlan's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "Lord Demise." The name twisted like a blade. It all clicked into place. The push for alliance marriage to tie Lachlan to a northern daughter and isolate him from Delia. Demis's cold curiosity every time he passed her in the halls. The attacks starting the exact day Lachlan singled her out in the grand hall. Demis was close enough to know Lachlan's routines, his weaknesses, his dreams. The only one who'd been at his side since the wilds, shaping him into a weapon. They went to Demis's chambers together. The Lord was waiting, seated calmly behind his desk, hands folded. Guards flanked the door. He smiled, slow, satisfied. "You're late," he said. "I expected you hours ago." Lachlan's voice was ice. "You killed the boy." "A necessity." Demise shrugged. "He was going to talk, loose tongues and all that." Delia stepped forward. "Why are you doing this?" Demise looked at her with disdain. "Because he was never supposed to remember you, my dear. That was the whole point." Lachlan stiffened. "Explain." Demise leaned back. "The Stormvale line was supposed to end with the coup 18 years ago. I orchestrated it beautifully. Your parents dead, the palace burning. You, a small, inconvenient boy, smuggled out by loyalists who thought they could hide you until you were old enough to reclaim the throne." He laughed softly. "They didn't count on me finding you first." "You took him?" Delia breathed. "Yes, and his memories. The Mist Spirit was my instrument. I told it to strip away every soft thing, every weakness, including you." He gestured to the bracelet. "I never understood why it left that trinket. Some stubborn piece of magic, I suppose. But it didn't matter. You were a perfect weapon, a perfect king. One who would never look back to the Omega who fed him scraps and made him believe in kindness." Lachlan's hands clenched. "You wanted me isolated." "I wanted you controllable," Demise corrected. "A king without ties is a king without leverage. But then you saw her in the hall, and something woke up, so I had to accelerate my plans." Delia felt sick. "You sent the note, the bolt, the fire." Demise inclined his head. "I needed you gone before he remembered enough to be dangerous, before he realized I killed his parents, before he realized the throne I helped him win was never meant for him. It was meant for my nephew, once the true heir was removed." Lachlan's voice was deadly calm. "So, you're confessing everything." "I'm explaining," Demise said. "Because you're too late. The council is already moving. They'll declare you unfit, haunted by ghosts, distracted by an Omega. I'll step in as regent until order is restored. And you? He looked at Delia. You'll be quietly disposed of. A tragic accident. A fall from the battlements, perhaps? Lachlan shifted, half man, half wolf, claws extending, eyes blazing amber. You'll have to go through me. Demi smiled with satisfaction. I already have. You forget that I made you, Lachlan. The door burst open. Guards poured in, loyal to Demise, armored and armed, swords drawn, crossbows leveled. Demise raised one hand. A faint shimmer of mist curled from his palm, remnant magic from the same spirit he'd once commanded. The air thickened, heavy, pressing against their lungs. Lachlan staggered, wolf form flickering as the mist coiled around him, quickly sapping the strength he'd paid so dearly for. Delia stepped in front of him. No. The room froze. She looked at Lachlan and saw the boy in the man's eyes, saw the pain, the confusion, the fierce protectiveness that had never left him. She reached for the bracelet on his wrist. Her fingers closed over the woven vines. Remember, she whispered. Nothing happened. The vines stayed cold. Demi's smile widened. When are you going to realize he's still the weapon I made him? 2 guards seized Delia from behind. She fought, clawing, kicking, but they were stronger. One twisted her arm behind her back until she gasped. The other pressed a blade to her throat. Lachlan roared, half human, half beast, but the mist tightened, forcing him back to human form. He dropped to one knee, breathing ragged. Let her go, he snarled. Demi stepped forward. First, you kneel. Abdicate the crown. Name me regent, or watch her bleed out on your pretty obsidian floor. Lachlan's eyes locked on Delia's. She shook her head, small, frantic. Don't. But he was already moving. He dropped fully to his knees, head bowed, voice hoarse. I abdicate. The throne is yours. The guards relaxed fractionally. Demise's smile turned triumphant. Delia screamed, but the blade pressed harder. A thin line of blood welled at her throat. Lachlan's head snapped up. You said you would let her go. Demis shrugged. I suppose I lied. He gestured at the guard to draw the blade back for the killing stroke. Time slowed. Lachlan lunged. Human, no shift, no claws, just raw, desperate fury. He slammed into the guard holding Delia, taking the blade meant for her in his side. Blood bloomed across his shirt. He staggered but didn't fall. Delia broke free, grabbing the fallen sword. She spun, slashing at the second guard. Lachlan finished him with a brutal elbow to the throat. Demis backed toward the window, face pale but still smiling. You're bleeding out, Lachlan. Even if you kill me, you'll die here, and she'll have to watch. Lachlan swayed, hand pressed to his side. Blood slipped between his fingers. Delia reached him, caught him before he fell. Lachlan. He looked at her, eyes dimming. I'm sorry, he rasped. I should have remembered sooner. I should have. She pressed her hand over his wound, tears falling on his skin. You're not dying, not now. The bracelet, still on his wrist, felt warm against her palm now. She leaned in, forehead to his, voice breaking. You promised to come back. You promised to protect me. You promised we'd be together. Something snapped. The bracelet flared, soft at first, then brighter. Golden light pulsed from the vines, the stone, the feather, wrapping around them both. Lachlan gasped, body arching as memories crashed over him in a torrent. Rain-soaked mill, stolen bread, blackberries on her tongue, small hands tying knots, promises made under a sliver moon, her laugh in firelight, her hand on his cheek telling him he was too young. The images burned through every scar, every hollow, year, every lie the mist spirit had carved into him. He choked out her name. Delia. She smiled through the tears streaming down her face, fingers tightening on his jaw. There you are. The light surged. The mist around them shattered like glass. Lachlan's wound began to close, slowly, painfully, but closing. He rose, eyes blazing full amber, wolf strength flooding back. Demise's smile vanished. Impossible. Lachlan shifted fully, massive silver-black wolf, larger than any in the realm, slamming into the remaining guards. The roar that followed shattered the windows and rattled the walls. Delia didn't run. She grabbed a fallen sword, stance wide. When a guard came for her, she parried like Lachlan had taught her, clumsy but fierce, then drove her knee into his gut. Lachlan finished the rest. Demis backed toward the window, face pale, mist curling around his fingers. You can't. Lachlan shifted back, human again, breathing hard, blood still streaking, his side but wound already scarring over. He stalked forward. You took 18 years. You took my family. You tried to take her. Demis sneered, but his voice shook. You're still weak. You'll always be that starving boy. Lachlan smiled, cold, lethal. That boy had someone who believed in him. That makes me stronger than you'll ever be. He struck once, clean, merciful. Demise crumpled. Silence fell. Lachlan turned to Delia. Blood streaked his face, but his eyes were clear. Finally, fully clear. He crossed to her in 2 strides, cupped her face with shaking hands. I remember. Every moment. Every promise. Every time you saved me. She laughed through tears. You saved yourself. No. He rested his forehead against hers. I survived, but you made me want to live. They kissed then. Slow, deep, unhurried. The kind of kiss that said they had time now. All the time in the world. When they broke apart, he pressed his lips to her temple. I've carried you in my bones all this time, even when I thought the ache was just emptiness. His thumb traced her cheek, catching a tear. Let me court you. Let me bring you flowers that aren't stolen, bread I baked myself, mornings where you wake up knowing you're wanted. Every single day, until you believe it the way I do. She closed her eyes, a fresh tear slipping free. You don't have to prove anything, and you don't know how to bake, Lachlan. I want to, he said fiercely. I want to spend the rest of my life proving I'm still the boy who promised to steal the moon for you. Only this time, I'll keep every vow. Delia smiled against his mouth. You're still too young to be making promises. He laughed. Real, bright, the sound of a boy finally home. Not forever. I've grown up fast. You'll see. Outside, the kingdom waited. There would be trials, councils, explanations. But for now, in the ruined chamber with moonlight spilling through, broken glass, they held each other. 2 survivors who had found their way back across 18 years and every kind of darkness. And the bracelet on his wrist glowed softly, vines and stone and feather whole again, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. Whisperfen Vale looked different under a clear spring sky, no longer shadowed by hunger or enforcers, but bright with new banners, new laughter, new children running through streets that once felt too narrow for dreams. The mills still stood on the riverbank, red door repainted, roof mended, wildflowers growing thick where damp straw once rotted. It was theirs now, not hidden, not stolen, but reclaimed. Lachlan insisted they return there on the anniversary of the night they met as adults. No guards, no ceremony, just the 2 of them, cloaks against the evening chill, a basket of bread he'd spent 3 frustrating mornings burning in the palace kitchens before finally producing something edible. He set the basket down, on the mill step, and looked at her, like he still couldn't believe she was real. I tried to bake it myself, he said, rubbing the back of his neck, cheeks faintly pink. My wolf thinks it smells wrong, keeps growling at the oven like it personally offended him. Delia laughed. Your wolf is a critic. He's obsessed with you, Lachlan admitted, voice dropping. Every time you walk into a room, he paces. When you're gone too long, he whines. When you smile at someone else, he wants to bite things. She stepped into him, hands sliding up his chest. Poor beast. He's not the only one. Lachlan caught her wrist gently, thumbs circling the pulse points. I still wake up some nights thinking you're gone, that I dreamed the past year. Delia rose on her toes, brushed her lips over his jaw. I'm here. I know. He breathed against her hair. But I want more than knowing. I want forever. He pulled back just enough to drop to one knee, on the worn threshold, the same spot where, 18 years ago, a starving boy had first looked up at her and offered a whittled wolf stick like it was treasure. From his pocket, he drew a thin gold band, simple, unadorned, except for one small stormbird feather preserved in crystal, the same feather she'd once tied into his bracelet. He held it up between them. Delia of Whisperfen Vale, he said, voice steady but thick with emotion. I've spent half my life trying to become someone worthy of the girl who fed a stranger when she had nothing to spare. I'm still learning how to be that man. But I know this. I want every morning with you. Every burnt loaf. Every rainy night. Every quiet moment. And every storm. And I want to marry you right here, on this threshold, where it all began. She leaned in, kissed him slow and deep, tasting salt and memory and promise. Yes, she whispered against his mouth. 1,000 times yes. They married at the mill under a full moon exactly 1 year later. No grand hall, no banners, just the river murmuring, wildflowers woven into Delia's braid, and a small circle of people who mattered. Brendan, a handful of trusted guards, the old cook from Whisperfen, who'd taught her everything. Lachlan wore no crown, only the bracelet, vines and stone and feather restored, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Delia wore the simple gray cloak she'd traveled to the capital in, now embroidered with silver stormbirds along the hem. They stood on the same threshold where a girl had given him bread and hope. Lachlan took her hands, eyes shining. I promised to come back. I promised to protect you. I promised we'd be together. She smiled, tears bright. You kept every promise. Not yet. He lifted her hand to his lips. But I'm going to spend forever keeping the rest. Later, when the others had gone and the mill was quiet again, he carried her inside and laid her down on a pallet of soft furs he'd arranged by the hearth. The fire crackled. Rain pattered on the new roof. He stretched out beside her, propped on one elbow, just looking. You're staring, she murmured. I've waited 18 years to look at you as my mate, he said softly. Let me stare. She reached up, traced the scars on his jaw, the old ones on his arms, the faint lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when he was a boy. I love you, she said simply. His breath hitched. I've loved you since the moment you tore off that first piece of bread. He kissed her then, slow, deep, tender, like they had all the nights in the world. Outside, the river sang its endless song. Inside, 2 hearts beat in time. Finally, fully, home. And somewhere in the quiet dark, the carved wolf stick rested on the mantle beside the bracelet, 2 small promises kept across 18 years, glowing softly in the firelight, proof that love never truly vanishes. It only waits to be remembered. How would you rate this story from 1 to 10? I love hearing your feedback, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.